In World War II, every army fielded its own grenades. Different shapes, different mechanisms, different destructive power, but all capable of changing the course of a battle in mere seconds. These small weapons put devastating force into the hands of individual soldiers, turning ordinary men into walking artillery. Today, we're examining every major grenade used during the Second World War, from the iconic pineapples of American GIs to the desperate weapons of resistance fighters. United States Arsenal of Democracy. The Mk2 fragmentation grenade became the iconic American hand grenade of World War II. Famously nicknamed the pineapple due to its deeply serrated cast-iron body, this defensive grenade entered service in 1918, but remained the standard issue for American forces throughout the Second World War. The distinctive grooves weren't actually designed to create uniform fragmentation, that's a persistent myth, but rather to provide a better grip for wet or gloved hands. The grenade's cast-iron body shattered into lethal fragments with an effective casualty radius of about 15 yards when the 4 to 5 second fuse detonated. GIs carried these grenades from the beaches of Normandy to the jungles of the Pacific, from North Africa to the mountains of Italy. The MK2's reliability and stopping power made it the standard against which all other Allied grenades were measured. Next on the list, the Mk3A2 offensive concussion grenade. Designed specifically for offensive attacks where the thrower had no nearby cover to shield themselves from fragments, the Mk3A2 took a completely different approach from the Mk2. Introduced during World War II, it relied on a powerful concussion blast rather than flying shrapnel to neutralize enemies. Its fiber body contained a charge of TNT that produced devastating overpressure in confined spaces, making it ideal for clearing bunkers, buildings, and fortified positions. American assault troops could throw these and immediately advance without waiting for fragments to settle, maintaining momentum during attacks. The reduced danger radius, about 10 yards compared to the Mk2's much larger fragment zone, allowed infantry to use it aggressively in close combat. Moving on to the M15 white phosphorus grenade, known universally to American troops as Willie Pete. The M15 was a genuinely terrifying chemical weapon that served dual purposes on the battlefield. Upon detonation, it scattered white phosphorus particles that ignited spontaneously when exposed to air, creating an instant thick smokescreen for concealment. But the phosphorus also caused horrific burns that were nearly impossible to extinguish. The chemical would continue burning through flesh until completely consumed or deprived of oxygen. First deployed during World War II, Willie Pete grenades were used extensively in the Pacific theater against Japanese bunkers and in Europe for marking targets and creating smoke cover. The psychological effect was profound. Enemy troops learned to fear the distinctive white smoke that signaled a phosphorus grenade. The M18 colored smoke grenade served a completely different purpose, signaling rather than destruction. Vital for communication on confused battlefields where radio silence was necessary or radios had failed, the M18 emitted vibrant clouds of colored smoke in various colors, including red, green, yellow, and violet. American troops used these extensively to mark landing zones for resupply aircraft, identify friendly positions to supporting aircraft, designate targets for airstrikes, and signal retreat or advance during complex operations. In the dense jungles of the Pacific and the hedgerows of Normandy, colored smoke often provided the only reliable means of coordinating between ground units and aircraft overhead. Next up, the M14 thermite incendiary grenade. This was a specialized tool of sabotage rather than combat. Packed with thermite, a mixture of powdered aluminum and iron oxide, the M14 burned at temperatures exceeding 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit when ignited, hot enough to melt through engine blocks, weld artillery breaches shut, destroy weapons caches, and burn through thick steel plating.
American troops used these primarily for demolition work, destroying captured enemy equipment to prevent its use, and in commando raids, where permanently disabling enemy materiel was the objective. The thermite reaction was nearly impossible to extinguish with water, making it devastatingly effective against vehicles and equipment. The M9A1 anti-tank rifle grenade represented infantry's answer to armor. Fired from the end of a standard M1 Garand rifle using a special launching adapter and blank cartridge, the M9A1 allowed infantry squads to engage light armor and fortifications from a distance of up to 100 yards. It utilized a shaped charge warhead, a cone of explosive designed to create a focused jet of molten metal and explosive gases capable of punching through armor plate. While largely ineffective against the frontal armor of German medium and heavy tanks, it proved useful against lighter vehicles, fortified positions, and the thinner side and rear armor of tanks. American infantry valued having at least some anti-tank capability organic to the rifle squad. Moving on, the M17 impact fragmentation grenade. Unlike the time-delayed fuses of standard grenades, the M17 was designed to detonate on impact, eliminating the possibility of enemies throwing it back. This sounded effective in theory, but in practice, the impact mechanism proved dangerously sensitive, leading to premature detonations that killed American soldiers. Reports of grenades exploding when bumped inside packs or dropped accidentally led to the M17 being withdrawn from frontline service early in the war. It remained in limited use for specialized applications where immediate detonation was essential, but never achieved widespread deployment.
The M7A1 CS gas grenade served a specialized role in clearing fortifications. Used primarily for riot control in rear areas, but also for clearing caves and bunkers, the M7A1 released CS tear gas, a powerful lacrimatory agent that caused immediate tearing, coughing, and temporary incapacitation. It was particularly effective in the Pacific Theater, where American forces faced Japanese defenders entrenched in elaborate tunnel networks and cave systems. Rather than assault these positions directly at terrible cost, troops would saturate them with gas grenades, forcing defenders to either emerge and surrender or suffocate in the confined spaces. Germany, Wehrmacht, and SS. The Stielhandgranate 24 stick grenade became the legendary German potato masher that defined Wehrmacht infantry tactics. Introduced in 1924 as an improved version of World War I designs, its distinctive long wooden handle wasn't just for show. It provided superior leverage, allowing German soldiers to throw it considerably farther than the heavier Allied spherical grenades. The hollow handle contained a pull cord connected to a friction igniter. Pulling the cord started a 4 to 5 second fuse. The explosive head scattered fragments, though less extensively than serrated designs like the Mk2. German doctrine emphasized the stick grenade's throwing range, allowing stormtroopers to clear trenches and bunkers from greater distances. Millions were produced, serving on every front from the deserts of North Africa to the frozen steppes of Russia. Next up, the Stielhandgranate 43, a simplified stick grenade design. As the war turned decisively against Germany and resources grew scarce, the Model 43 simplified the complex stick grenade design to speed production and reduce manufacturing costs. Introduced in 1943, it moved the detonator mechanism to the top of the explosive head rather than inside the hollow handle of earlier models. This allowed the use of cruder materials and less skilled labor. Despite the simplification, it remained effective and was produced in huge numbers during Germany's desperate final years. The Einhandgranate 39 represented a completely different approach. Small, lightweight, and lethal, this egg-shaped grenade entered service in 1939 and could be carried in much larger numbers than the bulky stick grenades. Its compact oval shape, roughly the size of a chicken egg, made it a favorite among German assault troops and paratroopers who needed to carry maximum firepower with minimum weight. The thin metal casing fragmented effectively, and its small size allowed it to be thrown into windows, bunkers, and confined spaces where larger grenades wouldn't fit. Fallschirmjäger units particularly favored it during airborne operations.
Moving on to the Geballte Ladung, bundled charge, a desperate, improvised anti-tank solution. This fearsome weapon consisted of a standard stick grenade with 6 additional explosive heads wired or strapped around the central handle, creating a massive concentrated blast capable of disabling tank tracks, damaging light armor, or destroying fortifications. German infantry used these when dedicated anti-tank weapons were unavailable, though getting close enough to a tank to use one required extraordinary courage or desperation. The bundled charge saw increasing use during Germany's defensive battles from 1943 onward as conventional anti-tank weapons grew scarce. The Nebelhandgranate 39 smoke stick looked visually similar to the explosive stick grenade, but was marked with a distinctive white band around the head to prevent deadly confusion. Introduced in 1939, the Model 39 smoke grenade released thick white or colored smoke to mask troop movements, blind enemy observation posts, and machine gunners, or signal to friendly forces. German doctrine emphasized using smoke to cover withdrawals and flanking maneuvers, making these grenades tactically essential throughout the war. Next on the list, the Panzerwerfer Mine 1 Heat. This unusual throwable anti-tank weapon was designed specifically for Luftwaffe ground troops and paratroopers facing Soviet armor. Introduced in 1943, it featured canvas stabilizing fins that deployed automatically in flight, keeping the shaped charge warhead oriented correctly to ensure it struck armor at the optimal angle for penetration. The hollow charge design could theoretically penetrate up to 150 millimeters of armor, making it dangerous even to heavy tanks, provided the thrower could get within the 30-yard throwing range and hit a vulnerable spot. The Haftholladung 3 magnetic anti-tank grenade was a terrifying weapon to actually use in combat. This magnetic-shaped charge required a soldier to sprint directly up to an enemy tank under fire, attach the device to the hull using its powerful magnets, pull the fuse, and then run like hell before the 7-second delay ended in a devastating shaped charge explosion. Introduced in 1942, it could penetrate over 140 millimeters of armor, making it lethal to any tank. But the danger to the user was extreme. Many German soldiers died attempting to deploy these weapons. They saw use primarily on the Eastern Front, where desperate infantry faced masses of Soviet armor. Moving on, the Diskushandgranate, known as the turtle grenade due to its unusual discus or turtle shell shape. This experimental grenade used an ingenious centrifugal arming mechanism. Spinning through the air after being thrown caused internal weights to shift, arming the impact fuse. It would then detonate immediately upon striking anything solid. While clever in concept, it saw limited production and use, with most examples appearing in 1944-45 during Germany's weapons experimentation phase.
The Blendkörper II represented psychological warfare in grenade form. This teardrop-shaped glass bulb filled with irritant chemicals was designed specifically for use against tanks. When smashed against a tank's vision blocks or engine grills, it released a cloud of noxious smoke containing tear gas and other irritants designed to force the crew to bail out, abandoning their vehicle. Introduced in 1940, it saw use primarily during the early war years before being largely superseded by more effective anti-tank weapons. Next up, the Gewehr Panzergranate 30 rifle grenade. This standard German high-explosive rifle grenade gave the individual infantryman a pocket artillery capability, bridging the gap between hand grenades and mortars. Fired from a cup-type launcher attached to the rifle muzzle, it could reach targets up to 200 yards away, well beyond hand-throwing range.
The explosive payload was substantial enough to destroy light fortifications and damage vehicles, making it a valuable asset for infantry squads. Finally, the WEHRMACHT 326. This small, fin-stabilized grenade was fired from a Walther signal pistol, offering a quick, lightweight method for projecting explosives over short distances of up to 80 yards. Introduced during the war as an expedient weapon, it provided German troops with an easy-to-carry grenade launcher capability without requiring dedicated launchers or modified rifles. United Kingdom and Commonwealth. The Mills bomb, number 36M, became the classic British grenade that defined Commonwealth infantry tactics throughout both World Wars. First entering service in 1915 and continuously refined through the number 36M variant used in World War II, this heavy cast-iron pineapple-style weapon was known for its absolute reliability under all conditions and its dangerously wide fragmentation radius exceeding 30 yards. British infantry doctrine classified it as a defensive grenade, meaning you threw it from cover and stayed down. The distinctive segmented body, 7-second fuse activated by releasing the spring-loaded lever, and devastating fragment pattern made it respected and feared. British, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, Indian, and South African troops carried Mills bombs throughout every theater of the war. The number 69 high-explosive Bakelite grenade represented a completely different philosophy. Encased in Bakelite plastic rather than metal, this grenade, introduced during World War II, was a true concussion grenade that produced very little dangerous shrapnel. This made it ideal for offensive operations where troops needed to advance immediately after throwing, and crucially, it was safe enough to use during training exercises without risking trainee casualties from fragments. The explosive blast in confined spaces was still lethal, making it effective for clearing bunkers and buildings while minimizing friendly fire risks.
Next up, the number 74 sticky bomb, one of the war's most ingenious yet problematic weapons. Introduced in 1940 during Britain's desperate post-Dunkirk period when invasion seemed imminent, this was a glass sphere filled with nitroglycerin, coated in powerful adhesive and covered by a protective wool sock. The user would strip away the outer cover and hurl it at a tank where the sticky coating was supposed to adhere long enough for the fuse to detonate the shaped charge. In practice, it often failed spectacularly. The adhesive wouldn't stick to dusty, muddy, or wet armor, or worse, it would stick to the thrower's uniform instead. Despite these problems, thousands were issued to British Home Guard units as a last resort anti-tank weapon. Moving on to the number 82 gammon bomb, a weapon particularly favored by British paratroopers. This brilliantly simple device was essentially a stockinette bag filled with plastic explosive, usually 1 to 2 pounds of Noble 808, with an impact fuse screwed into the top. The user could adjust the charge size for the target, making it incredibly versatile. Introduced in 1943, it could be molded into any shape, stuffed into crevices, or thrown like a conventional grenade. British and Canadian airborne forces used gammon bombs extensively during D-Day and subsequent operations, finding them perfect for demolition work and assaulting fortified positions. The number 75 Hawkins mine grenade blurred the line between mine and grenade. Looking like a flat metal flask, the Hawkins mine could be buried as an anti-tank mine on roads or thrown directly at vehicle tracks and wheels. Introduced in 1942, it was a versatile tool for British Home Guard units, resistance fighters, and regular infantry who needed to deny roads to enemy armor. Its flat profile made it easy to conceal, and the pressure-activated fuse would detonate when vehicles drove over it. Next on the list, the number 73 thermos anti-tank grenade. Resembling a thermos flask in both size and shape, the number 73 was essentially just a large tin container packed with high explosives. Introduced in 1940 as another desperate anti-tank expedient, it was powerful enough to damage tank tracks or destroy soft-skinned vehicles, but it was extremely heavy and difficult to throw accurately. Most examples went to Home Guard units, who would theoretically use them at close range against German tanks during an invasion. The No. 77 white phosphorus grenade served as Britain's smoke and incendiary grenade. Like its American counterpart, the No. 77 used white phosphorus to create instant visual cover with thick white smoke, while simultaneously causing horrific burns to anyone caught in the dispersal radius. Introduced during World War II, British troops used it throughout Europe and the Far East for marking targets, creating smoke screens, and the psychological effect of its terrifying burning properties.
Moving on, the No. 68 anti-tank rifle grenade. This was one of the first operational shaped charge weapons deployed by any army. Fired from a rifle cup discharger using a special launching cartridge, the No. 68 could penetrate up to 52 millimeters of armor, sufficient to defeat early war tanks at ranges up to 100 yards. Introduced in 1940, it gave British infantry at least some capability against German armor during the dark days when proper anti-tank guns were scarce. Finally, the No. 27 smoke grenade. This standard chemical smoke grenade was used by British forces for screening infantry movements during assaults, marking positions, and concealing withdrawals. Simple but effective, it filled the essential tactical role of providing portable smoke cover that individual soldiers could deploy instantly. Soviet Union Red Army. The F-1 fragmentation grenade became the Soviet Union's standard defensive grenade throughout World War II. Nicknamed the Limonka, or Little Lemon, due to its distinctive shape, this design was actually based on French World War I grenades that the Soviets had adopted and refined. Entering Soviet service in 1939, the F-1 featured a heavy cast-iron body with deep grooves, creating a devastating fragmentation pattern with a casualty radius exceeding 30 yards. Soviet infantry doctrine emphasized throwing these from cover during defensive operations. The UZRGM fuse provided a 3 to 4 second delay after releasing the lever. Millions were produced in factories across the Soviet Union, and the F-1 remained in production and service for decades after the war ended. Next up, the RGD-33 stick grenade. This complex Soviet stick grenade entered service in 1933 and required a specific throwing motion to properly arm its inertial fuse, a weakness that caused occasional malfunctions. However, it featured an innovative dual-purpose design. It could be thrown as a basic offensive grenade with minimal fragmentation, or it could be fitted with a heavy serrated metal sleeve that transformed it into a defensive grenade with greatly increased fragmentation. This versatility made it tactically valuable despite its mechanical complexity. It served throughout the war on all fronts. The RG-42 cylindrical grenade was born of desperate necessity during the German invasion. Introduced in 1942, when Soviet industry was evacuating eastward and resources were desperately scarce, the RG-42 was a magnificently simple design, essentially a tin can filled with TNT and a coiled sheet metal liner that provided fragmentation. It was incredibly easy to manufacture, even in besieged cities with minimal industrial capacity, allowing Soviet forces to maintain grenade production when more complex designs would have been impossible. Despite its crude appearance, it was quite effective and remained in production throughout the war.
Moving on to the KS Molotov cocktail. The famous incendiary bottle weapon became synonymous with Soviet desperate resistance, particularly during the Winter War against Finland and the early desperate months fighting Germany. The factory-produced KS versions represented a sophisticated evolution of the improvised bottle bomb. They contained a self-igniting mixture that burst into flames upon impact without requiring a separate igniter. Soviet factories produced millions of these during 1941–42 when they provided desperate infantry with one of the few weapons capable of stopping German tanks. The psychological impact was significant, and they proved remarkably effective against the engine compartments and vision blocks of armored vehicles. Finally, the VPGS-41 anti-tank rifle grenade. This rod-type rifle grenade was used by the Red Army beginning in 1941 to provide infantry squads with at least some anti-tank capability. The grenade featured a long rod that inserted into the rifle barrel, and a blank cartridge would launch it toward enemy armor. While somewhat effective against light vehicles and fortifications, the rod design had a serious flaw. It damaged rifle barrels over repeated use, leading to accuracy problems and eventual barrel failures. This led to its gradual replacement by other anti-tank weapons. Japan Imperial Army and Navy. The Type 97 hand grenade became the standard Japanese fragmentation grenade of the war. Introduced in 1937, it featured a unique and potentially dangerous arming mechanism. The fuse had to be struck sharply against a hard object, like a helmet, rifle stock, or rock, to activate the primer before throwing. This percussion ignition system sometimes led to premature detonations if grenades were dropped or roughly handled. The grenade's segmented body provided adequate fragmentation, and it saw use throughout the Pacific and China theaters. Japanese soldiers often activated them by striking them against their helmets in a distinctive motion that became familiar to Allied troops. Next on the list, the Type 91 multi-purpose grenade. This was a remarkably versatile weapon designed to serve multiple roles. Introduced in 1931, it could be thrown by hand like a conventional grenade, fired from a rifle-mounted cup launcher for extended range, or, most famously, used as ammunition for the Type 89 knee mortar grenade discharger. This multi-purpose design allowed Japanese units to carry one type of explosive projectile for multiple weapon systems, simplifying logistics. However, the versatility came with weight. It was considerably heavier than purpose-designed hand grenades.
The Type 98 stick grenade was directly modeled after the German stick grenade design, filtered through Chinese copies that Japanese forces had captured. Introduced in 1938, the Type 98 was a high-explosive blast grenade used by the Imperial Japanese Army throughout the war. The wooden handle provided throwing leverage similar to the German design, though Japanese soldiers were typically smaller in stature than Germans, somewhat limiting the range advantage. Moving on to the Type 99 Kiska grenade. Introduced in 1939 as an improvement on the earlier Type 97, the Type 99 dispensed with the fragmentation grooves for a smooth cylindrical body while featuring a more reliable and safer fuse mechanism. It was named after the Kiska Island operation and became widespread in Japanese service during the middle and late war years. The smooth body was easier to manufacture as Japanese industry came under increasing strain. Next up, the Type 4 ceramic grenade. As metal became critically scarce during the final years of the war, with American submarines strangling Japanese supply lines, Japan resorted to producing grenades made from pottery and ceramic. These porcelain grenades were filled with simple explosives and primitive fuses, meant primarily for home defense during the anticipated American invasion of the Japanese home islands. Their effectiveness was questionable, and their existence testified to Japan's desperate material situation by 1944–45. The Type 3 anti-tank grenade was a shaped charge grenade featuring a conical warhead and a hemp cloth tail for aerodynamic stability. Designed to penetrate Allied armor, it required the infantrymen to throw it accurately enough to strike the tank with the shaped charge cone oriented correctly, a difficult feat under combat stress.
It provided Japanese infantry with at least theoretical anti-tank capability during the later war years when they faced increasing numbers of American Sherman tanks. Moving on to the lunge mine. This weapon represented the absolute extreme of Japanese suicide tactics and desperation. The lunge mine was a shaped charge mounted on the end of a long bamboo pole. The soldier would charge directly at a tank and thrust the mine against its hull, triggering the contact fuse. The resulting explosion would destroy the tank and instantly kill the attacker. This horrific weapon of last resort appeared during the final desperate months of the Pacific War, reflecting Japan's willingness to sacrifice soldiers in suicide attacks against overwhelming Allied material superiority. Finally, the Type 89 knee mortar shell. While primarily ammunition for the Type 89 grenade discharger, misleadingly called a knee mortar by Allied troops, Japanese soldiers sometimes threw these projectiles by hand in desperate close combat situations. However, this practice was extremely risky because the shells lacked a proper delay fuse designed for hand throwing, often detonating immediately or unpredictably, killing the thrower. Italy, REGIO ESERCITO. The bomba a mano modello 35, known as the Red Devil, was the most common Italian grenade of World War II. Small, relatively light, and painted distinctive red, it entered service in 1935 as an offensive grenade. Unlike most Allied and German grenades with time delay fuses, this was an impact grenade designed to detonate when it struck the ground or target. This made it impossible for enemies to throw back, but it was also notoriously dangerous to handle. If a throw failed or the grenade struck something unexpected, it could kill the thrower. Italian troops used these throughout North Africa, the Balkans, and the Italian campaign. Next up, the OTO Modello 35. This was another Italian impact grenade, distinguished by its unusual construction. It contained a lead ball filled with explosives, designed to ensure the impact fuse would detonate reliably when it struck the ground. Introduced in 1935 alongside the bomba a mano, it shared the same dangerous characteristics of immediate detonation upon impact, requiring Italian soldiers to be extremely careful with throwing technique. Moving on, the Breda Modello 35. The Breda 35 was distinguished by its long fabric safety strip that had to be removed before throwing. Like other Italian grenades of the period, it relied on an impact fuse rather than a time delay. This family of impact grenades reflected Italian design philosophy, emphasizing immediate effectiveness over user safety, a trade-off that caused numerous casualties among Italian troops from handling accidents. France and Minopowers. The F-1 defensive grenade was France's standard fragmentation grenade, originally developed during World War I. This heavy cast-iron defensive weapon served as the direct inspiration for numerous other nations' grenade designs, including both the American Mark II and the Soviet F-1. France continued using it throughout the brief 1940 campaign, and Free French forces carried them throughout the liberation. The deep segmentation and heavy iron body created a lethal fragmentation radius that required the thrower to take cover immediately. The OF offensive grenade served as France's offensive counterpart to the defensive F-1. Made of thin, stamped metal rather than cast iron, the OF relied primarily on blast pressure rather than fragmentation, producing a much smaller danger radius. This allowed French assault troops to throw them and immediately advance behind the explosion without waiting for fragments to settle, maintaining offensive momentum during attacks. Next on the list, the Model 1937 offensive grenade. This represented France's modernization of earlier designs in the years before World War II. The Model 1937 was a stamped metal grenade that proved lightweight and considerably easier to mass-produce than the older cast-iron F-1, making it suitable for large-scale manufacture. It saw use during the 1940 campaign and subsequently with Free French forces. The ET-40 Filipinka was manufactured underground by the Polish Home Army resistance during the brutal German occupation. Despite being produced in clandestine workshops with minimal tools and constant risk of discovery, the Filipinka was an impact grenade styled after anti-tank designs that proved remarkably effective. Its existence demonstrated that determined resistance fighters could produce professional-grade ordnance under the most adverse conditions imaginable. Polish partisans used these during the Warsaw Uprising in 1944 and throughout the occupation. Finally, the 36M Vexi from Hungary. This was the standard Hungarian hand grenade that served with Hungarian forces fighting alongside Germany on the Eastern Front and in the Balkans. Introduced in 1936, it featured a unique impact fuse system that armed itself during flight through centrifugal force, making it one of the more mechanically sophisticated designs among the Axis minor powers. Hungarian troops used these throughout their participation in the invasion of Yugoslavia, the war against the Soviet Union, and the final defense of Hungary itself. These were the weapons that turned ordinary soldiers into walking artillery, small enough to carry by the dozen, powerful enough to clear a bunker or destroy a tank. From the beaches of Normandy to the jungles of Burma, from the frozen ruins of Stalingrad to the volcanic sands of Iwo Jima, grenades were there in the hands of frightened young men doing terrible things because their nations demanded it. Some of these weapons were brilliant pieces of engineering, refined over decades of warfare. Others were desperate, improvised solutions created by nations fighting for survival with dwindling resources. Some were relatively safe and reliable. Others were as dangerous to the user as to the enemy.
But every grenade in this account represents the same fundamental reality of modern warfare. The individual soldier, whether advancing or defending, attacking or retreating, needed the power to kill enemies he couldn't see, hiding behind walls he couldn't breach, protected by cover he couldn't penetrate. The grenade gave him that power, at arm's length, for the price of a 3-second fuse and whatever courage he could summon.